"You don't have a home and I don't have a mom," said a 10-year-old girl to a young homeless woman at a bus stop. What happened next changed their lives forever. The door slammed shut behind her like a gunshot, echoing down the quiet suburban street. Sophia Cooper stood there in the cold, barefoot on the concrete, her breath catching in the back of her throat. She didn't cry, not yet. Her fingers clutched the thin hoodie draped over her arm like a shield, her phone buzzing once before she silenced it without looking. She had imagined this moment for years, the day she would finally leave Ethan's house, escape his grasp, his voice, his rules. But she never imagined it would look like this, thrown out in the middle of the night, no shoes, no plan, no goodbye. The air smelled like wet asphalt and distant cigarette smoke. Streetlights flickered overhead, as if hesitating to stay awake for her. She walked, carefully, the pavement biting at her feet with every step. Cars passed, none stopping, no one looked twice. That part didn't surprise her. She had mastered the art of invisibility a long time ago. It wasn't until she reached the old bus stop on Jasper Avenue that her legs finally gave in. She sat down hard on the wooden bench, pulling her knees to her chest, shaking. That's when she noticed the girl. She hadn't seen her at first. A few feet away, tucked into the corner of the bus shelter, was a child, maybe 10 years old, with messy brown hair and a too-big hoodie pulled over her knees. A faded pink backpack sat next to her. Her face was streaked with dried tears, and she was watching Sophia with quiet curiosity. They didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Sophia managed a hoarse whisper. "You okay?" The girl hesitated. "You don't have shoes." Sophia let out a breath that almost became a laugh. "Yeah, guess I forgot them." The girl tilted her head. "Did someone hurt you?" Sophia blinked. "Why would you ask that?" "Because people only end up here this late when someone did something bad." "I know. That's why I'm here too." Sophia looked closer. The girl had bruises just visible under her sleeve. Not new, not old either. Her eyes were older than they should have been. "What's your name?" she asked. "Madison." "I'm Sophia." They sat in silence again. A breeze kicked up and Madison shivered despite the hoodie. Sophia instinctively took off hers and offered it. "Here, you need it more than I do." Madison took it without a word and pulled it tightly around her shoulders. The minutes stretched. No bus came. No one passed. The city felt like it had exhaled them both, like it didn't know what to do with them. Then, headlights. A car slowed as it approached. Sophia's pulse jumped. Madison shrank into the corner. The car stopped. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a navy coat, glasses fogged slightly from the chill. "Hey," he said gently, hands visible, non-threatening. "Are you two okay?" Sophia stiffened. "We're fine." "You don't look fine," he said calmly. "It's freezing. You're barefoot. And this one," he looked at Madison, "shouldn't be out this late alone." Sophia stood between him and Madison instinctively. "We're waiting for the bus. There's no buses after midnight on this line." She didn't answer. "I'm not here to scare you," he said. "My name's Alexander. I'm a child psychologist. I volunteer with outreach when I can't sleep. I saw you two from the road." Madison peeked out from behind Sophia. "You help kids?" "I try," he said. Sophia folded her arms. "We're not charity cases." "No, you're not," he said. "But it's cold, and I have an extra room. And food. I'll call someone you trust if you want. But I won't just drive off and pretend I didn't see you." Sophia stared at him, eyes narrowed. Everything in her screamed, "Don't trust him." But Madison was shivering now, jaw clenched, and Sophia's feet were numb. There were no buses, no shelters nearby, no choices. "Where's your house?" she asked. 2 blocks that way," Alexander said, pointing. "You can walk behind me. Never take your eyes off me if you don't want to. I get it." Sophia looked at Madison. The girl looked back with a mix of fear and hope. Sophia sighed. Okay, but we walk. Alexander nodded and turned, keeping his hands in view. They followed him slowly. Madison held Sophia's hand. The house was small, clean, warmly lit. Inside, the air smelled like cinnamon and soap. Alexander pointed to the kitchen. Water? Juice? You two want something hot? Sophia shook her head, but Madison asked for juice. He handed her a small bottle and showed her the bathroom, then came back to where Sophia stood near the door. You don't trust me, he said. That's smart. I've had a lot of practice. Me too, he replied. You can stay the night, no strings. I'll call Child Protective Services if you want, or not. Your call. Sophia didn't answer. He gave her a blanket and a sweatshirt, then left the room. Madison fell asleep in the guest room within minutes, curled under a quilt like she hadn't slept in days. Sophia sat by the doorway watching her, arms wrapped around her knees. Something shifted in her chest. She had left Ethan. She had nothing, no home, no job, no money. But now, here was this little girl with haunted eyes and bruises and nowhere to go. And somehow, they had found each other. Sophia whispered to the dark, You don't have a home. I don't have a mother. Now we have each other. She didn't sleep that night, but she stayed by Madison's side, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Sunlight slid through the blinds in thin lines across the floor, warming the edges of the unfamiliar room. Sophia stirred on the couch, her neck stiff, the thin blanket tangled around her legs. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then the scent of coffee and cinnamon drifted from the kitchen, and everything came back. The bus stop, Madison, Alexander's calm voice, and the decision to follow a stranger into his home. She sat up slowly. Her phone, long dead, was on the armrest beside her. She didn't bother checking it. Whatever messages were waiting could wait longer. The kitchen light was on. Alexander stood barefoot, stirring something on the stove, a mug of coffee in hand. He looked like someone who never stopped thinking, brows slightly furrowed even while cooking. Morning, he said without turning. You always cook for random people who show up barefoot at midnight? Sophia asked, folding her arms across her chest. He smiled without looking. Only the ones who don't stab me in my sleep. She rolled her eyes, but it was the closest thing to a laugh she'd had in weeks. Madison wandered in from the guest room, rubbing her eyes. She said nothing, just climbed onto a stool at the counter and sniffed the air. Pancakes, Alexander said, and apple slices, sugar-free syrup if you're into that sort of thing. Do I look like I'm into that? Madison said, voice still groggy but dry. Sophia shot her a surprised glance. Madison's eyes were clearer today, less hollow, less afraid. Alexander served them plates without asking if they were staying, like he already knew they would, at least for now. Sophia ate slowly, barely tasting anything. Her stomach twisted in on itself. The food was good. She just wasn't used to feeling safe and hungry at the same time. So, Alexander said casually, are you two always a team, or was last night the first meeting? Sophia glanced at Madison. First time, Madison said, mouth full of pancake. We met at the bus stop, Sophia added, voice neutral. Alexander nodded. That's a heavy coincidence. Sophia looked up. You're not going to call CPS on her? I will if that's what she wants, or if she's in danger. But she's warm, fed, and talking, which is more than a lot of kids I meet on intake days. Madison stopped chewing. Her eyes dropped to her lap. Alexander softened. I'm not here to force anything, but I do have to ask. Those bruises on your arm, can I ask where they came from? Madison stiffened. Sophia cut in. She doesn't want to talk about it. Alexander nodded again, as if expecting that. Understood. They ate in silence after that, and when the meal was over, Alexander offered them both clean towels and pointed them toward the shower. "You don't have to decide anything today," he said, "but you can't live at a bus stop, and I have extra toothpaste." That afternoon, Sophia sat by the window in the guest room, watching Madison nap with one arm curled under her cheek. Outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful. Birds picking at seed, trees turning yellow, a dog barking somewhere. It reminded her of her old ballet studio, the one Ethan forced her to quit when she was 17 because her leotards were too revealing and the music was inappropriate. He claimed to be protecting her. Her mother had agreed, or maybe just stayed quiet. She used to sneak out to dance after dark in the rec center, rehearsing pirouettes in worn socks and recording videos on her phone. That was the only place she felt like she owned her body, her time, her voice. Ethan found the videos. He didn't hit her. That wasn't his style. Instead, he deleted every single one, then made her sit through a 2-hour lecture about what kind of girl she was becoming. After that, he took the door off her bedroom hinges and moved her phone charger into the living room. Sophia swallowed hard. Even now, thinking of his voice made her chest tighten. She was still staring out the window when Alexander knocked on the doorframe. "Can I come in?" She nodded. "I'm heading out to grab some groceries. I figured I'd stock up on stuff kids like. Any preferences?" "Madison loves those mini chocolate chip muffins," she said, before realizing how easily it came out. "I'll get some," he said. "You okay?" She wanted to say yes. She wanted to be the kind of person who just bounced back. But instead, she said, "I haven't been okay in a long time." Alexander leaned against the wall. "I work with trauma victims, kids mostly, but adults too. The thing I see most often is people thinking they need to fix it all overnight. And healing doesn't work like that. Neither does trust. It's not a race." Sophia met his eyes. "Are you always this calm?" He gave a half smile. "Only on the outside." That night, after dinner, Madison showed Sophia her drawing notebook. Most of the pages were full of shadowy shapes, trees with angry faces, houses with bars on the windows, a girl alone in the rain. But the last page was different. It was a sketch of the three of them. Stick figures, but smiling. One with glasses, one with wild hair, one holding a cup of juice. "You drew me," Sophia asked. "You gave me a hoodie," Madison said with a shrug. "You didn't have to." Sophia touched the page gently. "Thank you." Madison looked up. "Are you going to leave?" "Not if I can help it." The girl smiled, just barely. Later, Sophia sat alone in the hallway, legs stretched out, scrolling through old texts on her now-charged phone. Nothing from her mother. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. One voicemail, she didn't listen, but then the screen lit up with a new message. "Unknown number. You can run, but I'll destroy everything you touch." Her throat went dry. The number was blocked, but she didn't need confirmation. She knew that voice even when it wasn't speaking. Ethan had found her. She stared at the message, trembling, until Madison opened the door behind her. "Can't sleep," the girl whispered. Sophia forced a smile and slipped her phone into her pocket. "Me neither." They sat there in the hallway together for a long time, quiet, still, but inside her something had cracked open, not from fear, but from resolve. He could threaten her, but he would not get near that girl, not ever again. By the end of the week, Sophia had memorized the sound of the old hardwood floor in Alexander's hallway. It creaked differently depending on which direction you walked. She'd started noticing small things like that, details that only surfaced when your brain was finally allowed to stop running in survival mode. Madison had settled into a quiet rhythm, reading, drawing, sitting curled up on the couch like a cat who didn't want to admit it liked being warm. Alexander worked from home during the mornings, giving his patients therapy sessions via video calls from his office upstairs. He didn't push Sophia to talk, But he was always there, present without being invasive. Sophia needed that space. But the silence didn't mean she was idle. She started by searching online job boards, fingers hovering over the keyboard for minutes at a time. Teaching dance again felt like inviting back a part of herself she hadn't seen in years. And she wasn't sure that part still belonged to her. Still, she found a studio 5 blocks away advertising for a part-time instructor. The ad was plain. After-school program. Weekdays 3 to 6, all ages, experience required. She filled out the application and hit send before she could second-guess herself. That same afternoon, she turned her attention to something more terrifying than employment: foster laws, custody petitions, emergency placement options, guardianship. The legal terminology was dense, like trying to walk through wet cement. But she read and highlighted and kept a notebook full of questions. Madison was still technically a ward of the state. What she and Alexander were doing, housing her without notifying Child Protective Services, was a legal gray area. A well-intentioned one, maybe, but still fragile. Sophia didn't want fragile. She wanted permanent, which is why she almost dropped her phone when it rang and the caller ID flashed State Social Services, Margaret Avery. She answered with a tentative, "Hello?" "Ms. Cooper," came a clipped voice. "I'm calling regarding Madison. We've been informed she's currently residing with Dr. Alexander Harrison. Is that correct?" Sophia's throat tightened. "Yes, she's safe." "I'll be the judge of that," Margaret replied. "I'm scheduling an in-person welfare check. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. I expect full transparency and cooperation." "Of course." "Good. Inform Dr. Harrison. Goodbye." The line clicked dead. Alexander was unsurprised by the call. "She's just doing her job," he said. "Margaret's known for being cold but not dishonest." That doesn't mean she'll see things our way," Sophia muttered, folding laundry with aggressive precision. "I'll be here," he assured her. "Let her try and argue with someone who knows the system inside out." Sophia didn't say it, but she wasn't worried about Margaret judging him. She was worried about Margaret judging her. Margaret arrived exactly on time the next morning, a middle-aged woman with tightly pinned hair, a charcoal suit, and a briefcase like a weapon. She stepped into the house like it was a courtroom, taking in the living room, the breakfast crumbs on the counter, the art on the fridge. Madison sat stiffly on the couch, eyes locked on Sophia like a lifeline. "Madison," Margaret said flatly, "you look well." "I am," the girl replied. "Are you attending school?" "She's homeschooled for now," Alexander said, "temporarily until placement is formalized." Margaret made a note. "And placement, as of now, is unapproved." "We're working on that," Sophia said. "I've started the research on legal guardianship." Margaret's eyes flicked up. "Are you currently employed?" "I've applied to several positions, including one at a dance studio with no guaranteed income or benefits." Sophia blinked. "How?" "We do background checks, Ms. Cooper. It's my job to know who's caring for state wards." Alexander stepped in smoothly. "Margaret, I think you'll agree that Madison is safer and more emotionally stable here than in the previous 2 placements." Margaret didn't respond. She simply closed her notebook and gave a cool nod. "I'll be filing my report. In the meantime, I advise both of you not to get too attached. Informal arrangements like this don't last." Sophia flinched, but she didn't argue. Madison didn't say a word until the front door closed behind Margaret. Then she whispered, "She doesn't want me here." Sophia crouched beside her. "It's not about what she wants. It's about what's right, and we're going to fight for that. Together." Later that afternoon, Sophia stepped outside to grab the mail, bills, junk flyers, and one unmarked manila envelope sitting on the doorstep. She frowned. No return address. She opened it slowly. Inside were 3 neatly folded sheets of paper, printed records on hospital letterhead. Her name, her date of birth, a psychiatric institution in upstate New York. Diagnoses she didn't have, medications she'd never taken, discharge notes with forged signatures. Her hands trembled. She'd never been to that hospital. She had never been admitted anywhere for mental health issues. Despite how many times Ethan told her she needed to be, it was fake. It was all fake. There was no signature at the bottom, no stamp, just the implication, just the threat. Alexander found her still staring at the papers 10 minutes later, white-knuckled and silent. "Oh, where did you get that?" he asked. "It was on the doorstep," she whispered. He scanned them quickly, expression darkening. "This is a setup. I know who sent it." He looked at her. "Ethan." She nodded. Alexander cursed under his breath. "He's trying to discredit you. These are supposed to scare you into silence or make you look unfit in a custody hearing." Sophia's stomach twisted. "Can he actually do that?" "Not if we get ahead of it," he said. "We'll document this. Submit it with a statement. Prove the records are forged. But Sophia..." She met his eyes. "You have to tell the whole truth. About everything. No more protecting people who never protected you." She nodded slowly. "I'm ready." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the walls, Sophia stood at the sink washing dishes. Madison sat at the kitchen table, drawing as usual, tongue between her teeth in concentration. Sophia reached for a glass when she heard it, the soft creak of the hallway door, slightly ajar. Madison froze. Then the voice. "Yes, I understand, but she's not suitable. The girl needs stability, not a stranger playing house." It was Margaret, on speakerphone. "She's not qualified. No job, no income, no legal right to even supervise. We'll finalize a transfer by next Friday." Sophia turned, but Madison was already gone. The notebook fallen to the floor, the chair pushed back with force. The words echoed like a blade. "Transfer by next Friday." Sophia's hands shook. She dried them on her jeans and ran after her. Sophia couldn't sleep. The shadows in Alexander's guest room were no longer comforting. They felt sharp, restless, like they knew something was coming. Every creak of the floorboard, every hum from the heating vents made her stomach twist tighter. Madison had barely spoken since overhearing Margaret's call. She still drew in her notebook, still curled beside Sophia on the couch, but her words had vanished. She didn't cry. She just disappeared inward. Sophia knew that place too well. That morning she stood in the kitchen staring at the sink, the faucet dripping in a maddening rhythm. Alexander came in, already dressed for the day, a leather notebook tucked under his arm. "Bad night?" he asked gently. Sophia shrugged. She didn't want to talk. "She doesn't have to," he said. "But nightmares left unspoken tend to grow." Sophia looked at him then, really looked, at the man who had taken them in without knowing anything about them, who made pancakes without asking for anything in return, who defended her when even she doubted herself. But trust was slippery now. "Why did you really help us that night?" she asked. Alexander paused. "Because you needed it." "That's not an answer." He sighed and set the notebook down. "My sister used to sleep at bus stops. Before she got clean, before she stopped trusting me." Sophia's brows furrowed. "You never mentioned a sister." "She doesn't talk to me anymore. Hasn't for years." He poured coffee into 2 mugs, pushing one toward her. "Her name's Mara. She lives out in Portland now, works in a women's shelter, but before that, she was in a rough place. And I wasn't there the way I should have been." Sophia took a sip of coffee, waiting. "There's more," Alexander admitted. "And you deserve to know, especially now that you're considering going to court for Madison." He hesitated, and then told her about Beatrice. Years ago, when Alexander was fresh out of grad school, he had been engaged to another therapist named Beatrice Lang. They worked at the same clinic, talked about opening a practice together. Everyone said they were perfect. But Beatrice struggled with anxiety and depression, something she had carefully hidden from the world but couldn't hide from Alexander. Instead of supporting her, he admitted, he grew distant, clinical, detached. "I treated her like a case, not a partner," he said. "By the time I realized how far she'd fallen, it was too late." Beatrice had a public breakdown at a conference, screaming accusations across a crowded room that Alexander was manipulative, cold, dangerous. The clinic covered it up quietly, but the damage was done. His career stalled. She disappeared. He hadn't seen her since. "She wasn't wrong," Alexander said quietly. "I wasn't malicious, but I was distant, focused on fixing people instead of hearing them." Sophia didn't speak for a long time. Then she asked, "And now?" "I try to listen, really listen." She nodded once, slowly. She didn't know what to make of it yet, but he'd told her the truth. That had to count for something. That evening, Madison woke from another nightmare, breathing fast, her little hands gripping the edges of her blanket like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Sophia rushed in. Hey, it's okay. You're safe. You're here." Madison blinked up at her, wide-eyed. "I wasn't dreaming." Sophia sat beside her. "What do you mean?" "I heard him, again, in the dream." Sophia stroked her hair. "Who?" "The man from before," Madison whispered. "My old foster dad, the last one. You said he was mean." Madison nodded. "He used to yell at his phone at night. I didn't tell anyone, but one night I heard the name. Ethan." Sophia froze. "What?" Madison's voice got smaller. "He said, 'Don't worry, she'll back off. Ethan's watching her now.'" "I didn't understand it then." Sophia's stomach dropped. It wasn't just about ruining her life. Ethan had help. He had connections. The next morning, Sophia opened her email to check in with the dance studio. Her interview was scheduled for next week. It was the only thing keeping her remotely hopeful, the idea that maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild something from the ashes. But her hope didn't last. There it was, a headline, trending on local news blogs and social media. Local woman allegedly harasses stepfather for money after mental breakdown. Anonymous sources cite history of manipulative behavior. Sophia clicked the link. Her chest felt like it was caving in. The article cited exclusive documents, the same forged ones from the manila envelope. It quoted a source close to the family who claimed she had made up stories of abuse to extort her stepfather after being cut off financially. The article included an old dance photo of her, cropped and stripped of context, under a caption that read, "A troubled woman with a history of erratic behavior." There was no name on the byline. Anonymous. Sophia barely registered her phone buzzing. Alexander calling from upstairs. She didn't pick up. She just sat there, eyes burning, hands numb. Because she knew what this meant. Ethan had gone public, and if people believed it, if the court believed it, Madison could be taken from her, all over again. The air felt heavier now, like the world had shifted just slightly off-center and refused to snap back into place. Sophia scrolled through the article again, numb. She had already read it 5 times that morning, each word slicing deeper than the last. Anonymous quotes, edited photos, fake documents. But what made her stomach twist wasn't the lies. It was how believable they looked. It wasn't just an attack, it was a strategy. She was being discredited in plain sight. "I filed the report this morning," she said quietly, staring into her coffee mug. "The police didn't seem optimistic. Said proving a fake article is malicious intent is tricky without a direct link." Across the table, Alexander nodded. "It's the media loophole. Online stories can float in legal grey areas as long as they're labelled opinion or have unnamed sources." Sophia rubbed her temples. He's going to win, isn't he? No, Alexander said firmer. He won't, because now we hit back the right way. That afternoon, they met with a lawyer named Vanessa Blake, an old friend of Alexander's from grad school, who now specialized in family law and trauma cases. She worked out of a small but warm office cluttered with case files, a giant whiteboard covered in color-coded timelines behind her desk. I'll be blunt, Vanessa said, flipping through Sophia's file. The article is damaging, but we've seen worse. What matters is what we can prove. The forged documents, the history of abuse, any connection between Ethan and the foster system. Sophia hesitated. Madison overheard something. A phone call. Vanessa looked up. What kind of phone call? Sophia turned to Madison, who had been quietly drawing in the corner. Sweetheart, Sophia said gently, remember what you told me about your last foster dad. Can you tell Vanessa? Madison's pencil stopped. She looked at Sophia, then at Alexander, then back to her sketch pad. And then she spoke, softly but clearly. He was on the phone. I don't know who with, but he said your name, and the other man's name too, Ethan. He said something like, don't worry, she'll back off. Ethan's watching her now. Sophia leaned in. Are you sure? Madison nodded. I remember it, because his voice got really low, and then he laughed, and he said, we'll shut her up for good. Vanessa's expression hardened. That's conspiracy. If we can link that phone call to a date and possibly tie that foster home to Ethan, even loosely, we have leverage. Alexander looked at Sophia. We need to go to Margaret. She won't believe us, Sophia said bitterly. She doesn't have to believe, Vanessa replied. She just has to see there's enough here to delay any transfer. Margaret agreed to meet in her office downtown. The room was sterile. Grey walls, a desk covered in carefully stacked folders, a single photograph of a cat on the shelf behind her. She greeted them without warmth, gesturing toward the two chairs opposite her desk. Sophia spoke quickly before nerves could trip her up. There's new information, a recorded testimony from Madison, and we've filed a legal complaint against Ethan, forged medical records, defamation, and possible collusion with a foster caregiver. Margaret raised a brow. That's a lot of allegations. Any hard proof? Vanessa stepped in. We're working on getting call logs and records from the previous placement. In the meantime, we're filing an injunction to pause Madison's transfer until the investigation is complete. Margaret sighed, clearly annoyed. You're asking me to put a vulnerable child in legal limbo based on a phone call from a 10-year-old. Alexander leaned forward. You've seen Madison's progress. You know what pulling her away now would do to her? Margaret looked at them, long and hard, then finally nodded. Fine. I'll delay the transfer, but understand this, the state won't wait forever. If you want to keep that girl, Ms. Cooper, you better start proving you're worth the fight. That night, Sophia sat with Madison in the living room, both curled up under a shared blanket. The TV played quietly in the background, some animated movie Madison wasn't really watching. She had her sketchpad again, but her pencil hadn't moved in 20 minutes. Hey, Sophia said, nudging her gently. You okay? Madison shrugged. I don't want to go back. You're not going back, Sophia said. Not if I have anything to say about it. Madison looked up. Promise? Sophia's throat tightened. She knew better than to make promises. But this time it felt different. I promise, she said, and she meant it. The next morning, the headlines changed. Breaking, businessman Ethan Cooper under federal investigation for fraud, embezzlement. Sources say over 2 million in falsified accounts discovered. Sophia stared at the article, blinking. He's being investigated, she whispered. Alexander nodded. It started quietly last month. IRS red flags. Someone finally leaked it to the press. She scrolled further, reading the official statement. No charges filed yet. Ongoing investigation. Cooper currently cooperating with authorities. And Sophia sat back in the chair, heart racing. Maybe this is it. Maybe it's turning around. But then, a knock at the door. A plainclothes officer. Is this the residence of Sophia Cooper? Yes, Alexander said. We're here to inform you that Ethan Cooper has been taken into custody under suspicion of financial crimes. He has posted bail and is under temporary house arrest. Sophia blinked. Wait, he's out already? The officer nodded. He was processed this morning, released this afternoon. She felt the blood drain from her face. He wasn't gone. He wasn't done. They found the video that evening. It came as a message to Sophia's phone. No name, no number. Just a video file. She hesitated, then tapped play. Ethan's face filled the screen. He looked clean, smug, perfectly composed. Sophia, he said, smiling like a man who still believed he owned the world. Cute story you're spinning, but you've forgotten one thing. He leaned closer. You think this is over? The screen cut to black. Sophia dropped the phone, hands shaking. Madison stepped into the room behind her. What was that? She asked. Sophia didn't answer, because she knew deep down this wasn't the end. It was the start of war. The courthouse smelled like old paper and anxiety. Sophia sat outside the family courtroom, knees bouncing, hands clenched in her lap. A knot of nerves twisted in her stomach, tighter than anything she'd felt before. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about Madison, about finally making her safe, about proving once and for all that Ethan couldn't take anything else from her. Across the corridor, Madison sat beside Alexander, coloring quietly in a book she had brought from home. Her sneakers dangled above the floor. Every now and then, she glanced up to make sure Sophia was still there. Vanessa arrived 5 minutes early, carrying 2 folders and an air of calm professionalism that Sophia wished she could borrow. Ready? She asked gently. Sophia nodded, not because she was ready, but because waiting any longer might break her. Inside the courtroom, the world slowed. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with sharp eyes and a kind smile, welcomed them and asked them to be seated. The courtroom wasn't packed, just Margaret on one side of the aisle, arms crossed but composed, and Alexander, Sophia, Madison, and Vanessa on the other. Let's begin, the judge said, flipping through the case file. We are here today to determine the temporary and possibly permanent placement of minor Madison Clare. Sophia barely heard the rest. Vanessa stood and began presenting the case. Calm, clear, and direct. She laid out the forged documents, the malicious news article, the anonymous video Ethan had sent. She submitted copies of the original forged medical reports, matched to Ethan's work printer. She showed bank records connecting Ethan to Madison's former foster father. It was a web, and now the court could see the strings. Sophia's chest rose and fell in short, shallow breaths. Then Margaret stood. She adjusted her glasses, stepped forward, and cleared her throat. I have been working in social services for 18 years, she began, and I'll be honest, when I first met Sophia Cooper, I was skeptical. She had no job, no custody rights, and no legal protection for the child she was harboring. Sophia winced at the word harboring. But, Margaret continued, in my line of work, we don't judge people by their worst day. We judge them by how they respond to it. And in the time since that first visit, I have watched Sophia secure work, initiate therapy for Madison, and cooperate with every legal process available. I've also seen a dramatic shift in Madison's emotional well-being, from withdrawn and distrustful to expressive and engaged. That speaks volumes, not about convenience, about care, real, messy, committed care. She turned toward the judge. And for that reason, I support the petition for full legal guardianship to be granted to Ms. Cooper. Sophia's hands flew to her mouth. Madison looked up, wide-eyed. The judge leaned forward. Thank you, Ms. Avery. Now, would the minor like to speak? Madison nodded and walked to the stand. her sketchbook still in her arms. The judge smiled. "You can speak freely here, Madison. Tell us what's in your heart." The little girl climbed onto the wooden chair and sat upright, clearing her throat in a way that mimicked Sophia, something she had watched her do dozens of times. "I've had 6 foster homes," Madison began. "Some were nice, some were scary, but none of them felt real, none of them saw me. I was just passing through." She held up her sketchbook and flipped it to the last page. 3 figures drawn carefully: Sophia, Madison, and Alexander, all holding hands. "This is my real home. These are my people. And I know Sophia didn't have to take me that night, but she did. She didn't even have shoes. She just sat with me." Madison's voice wavered. "I don't want another house. I don't want another bed. I just want to stay with the people who actually see me." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge wiped away a single tear. The ruling came 20 minutes later. "Sophia Cooper," the judge said, "based on the overwhelming testimony, the verified efforts to stabilize the child's life, and the direct support of CPS, I am granting you full legal guardianship of Madison Clare, effective immediately." Sophia burst into tears, the kind that came from too many days spent pretending to be strong. Madison jumped into her arms before the bailiff could even finish handing over the paperwork. Alexander stood back, smiling quietly, pride and relief evident on his face. It was over. They had won. On the ride home, the sun was just starting to dip below the skyline. Madison played music from the back seat, singing along off-key, while Sophia stared out the window, her hand loosely laced with Alexander's across the center console. Then, a buzz. Sophia's phone lit up with a news alert. She tapped it instinctively. Her blood ran cold. Breaking news: Ethan Cooper escapes police custody in early morning. Transfer details unclear. Manhunt underway. Believed armed and dangerous. Sophia dropped the phone. "What is it?" Alexander asked, pulling over. She turned to him slowly. "Ethan's gone." His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Madison's voice came from the back, suddenly quiet. "Gone where?" No one answered. Because no one knew. For 2 weeks after Ethan's escape, the world tilted sideways. Sophia checked every lock twice, then 3 times. She didn't sleep without the security app open on her phone. Madison started keeping her light on at night again, asking every evening, "Will he find us?" And every evening Sophia gave the same answer: "Not this time." Still, the fear never quite left. It lived in the edges of their days, in the momentary silence between doorbells and footsteps, in shadows that stretched just a little too long. Alexander installed cameras. Vanessa called in favors. The police expanded their search radius. But Ethan had vanished. Until he didn't. The footage hit the internet on a Thursday morning. Grainy video clips from Sophia's dance school. Years old. One of them showed her crying in a dressing room, her makeup smudged. Another showed her mid-rehearsal, yelling at a fellow dancer for missing a step. The accompanying story was just as vicious as the last. Sources say guardianship given to emotionally volatile former student. Erratic behavior caught on camera. Is the child really safe? Sophia stared at the article, heart pounding. "He's trying again," she whispered, but this time the world was different. Something had shifted. Within hours, former students began to comment, one by one. That video was taken after Sophia's mom died. Of course she cried. "I was there that day. She wasn't yelling, she was leading. That clip is edited. She taught me how to believe in myself. She's not unstable, she's a survivor." Then came the flood. Women, some anonymous, some brave enough to post under their real names, shared stories of Ethan's manipulation, his financial coercion, his emotional threats. One even admitted she'd been paid to spread false stories about Sophia during the custody process. The public turned on him, Hard. The media began retracting articles. The first one, the worst one, was pulled down entirely with a formal apology. "We failed to properly vet our sources. We regret the harm caused." Sophia didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood in the middle of the kitchen, Madison holding her hand, and breathed in deeply for the first time in weeks. It was over. Almost. He showed up 6 miles from their house. Early morning, caught on security camera footage at a gas station. Same car, same license plate, disguised under a hoodie and sunglasses. But it was him. The police arrived before he could get back in the car. He didn't fight, didn't run, just smirked as they cuffed him. The arrest was quiet, but the headlines weren't. Fugitive Ethan Cooper captured, facing federal and state charges. Conspiracy, defamation, fraud. How one man tried to erase his victim. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed that night, knees to her chest, Alexander beside her. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I think so," she said. "It just doesn't feel real yet." He brushed her hair back gently. "It will." They sat in silence for a while. The kind that didn't hurt. The kind that felt earned. And then Madison's small voice echoed from the hallway. "Is he really gone?" Sophia answered without hesitation. "Yes, baby, he's gone." 18 months later, the house was full of warmth. Not just the kind from sunlight on the floorboards or cinnamon in the oven, the real kind. The kind that lingers in laughter and shared mornings and the sound of feet running down the hallway. Sophia stood in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting a thin gold bracelet on her wrist. Alexander appeared behind her in the reflection, straightening his tie. "You ready, fiancé?" She grinned. "I was born ready." "Liar, you tried to cancel this 3 times. "Yeah, but I didn't," she said, turning to him. "That's progress." Their wedding was still a few months away, small, intimate, with just the people who mattered. But today wasn't about them. Today was about Madison. The official adoption ceremony had been that morning, quick, quiet, but powerful. A judge signed the papers. A new last name was printed on a certificate, and just like that, Sophia was no longer a temporary guardian. She was a mother. Madison was now Madison Claire Cooper. They celebrated that evening with dinner at home, fairy lights strung across the ceiling, music playing low. Alexander cooked. Madison decorated the table. Sophia held the newest member of the family, a 6-month-old baby girl named Anna. They'd started the adoption process for Anna 3 months ago. A newborn left in a hospital bassinet. No name, no family. Just the need for someone to say yes. And Sophia had. The dinner table buzzed with laughter. Anna babbled in Sophia's arms, Madison animatedly retelling her favorite story about Alexander nearly burning pancakes. The 3 of them clinked glasses, orange juice, of course, and Sophia lifted hers in a mock toast. "To chosen family," she said. Madison held her glass high and smiled, wide and true. "You didn't have a daughter," she said, her voice strong and full of joy. "I didn't have a mom." She clinked her glass gently against Sophia's. "Now, we have each other." And for the first time in a very long time, there was nothing left to fear, only the future. Sometimes the smallest moments change the biggest lives. If this story moved you, leave a like and subscribe for more.